Hello everyone, this is Whitney from Starhearth Astrology, and I'm here tonight, to talk to you about the Taurus full moon that happens on Halloween. So we are coming off of a difficult Libra new moon, and sliding into a somewhat more fortunate Taurus full moon. Although this one definitely has a ton of energy, packs a punch. There will be some trick or treats, some surprises in it for some of us, right? Not every transit hits everyone's chart. Not everyone experiences it the same. It depends on the houses. It depends on which planets are activated, but for some of us, it'll be there. So I wanted to kind of jump in, look at the chart, look at kind of these dynamics. We are also, this Taurus full moon would be a culmination from the Taurus new moon, but also kind of just in our lunar month, the busier times. And if your life is anything like mine, the days leading up to it get frenetic. We get a little bit more emotional. The moon in Taurus is exalted, so it can express itself as the moon. So we're getting into the kind of lunar craziness. We're building up towards the election, which happens 2 days after that. So there's a lot of tension in the air for the full moon, which is the kind of emotional peak, and kind of like the crisis point, not necessarily in something bad always happening, like a crisis, but just in the energy building and then the release point. Or kind of also, I think of full moons as kind of like the point of total commitment. So we kind of, if you are going up a hill, when you get to the top and you start moving down, or, you get on the water slide and you push off, you've committed. And so that can kind of be what happens during full moons. It's usually action. It's usually actually something in our lives. It's not kind of an internal goal or an internal sense of something. That's more of the new moon. This is more like, okay, so that internal sense of something has become something else, reached a kind of crisis point where we had to make some kind of decision about it, and then we have made that decision. And so then the time period from the full moon to the third quarter and to the entrance into the fourth quarter, the lunar month, is kind of seeing that through, what it looks like. And so this is a particularly potent one because we could have some rash behavior because the moon conjoins Uranus, that then we have to spend the next couple of weeks really working through, because we've committed and it can be a bigger deal than we thought it was. So let's jump in and look at the chart. Let's see. Here we go. Taurus full moon happens on October 31st. The moment of it is in the morning. So for where I am, that is 8:49 a.m. Mountain Time. So you can just adjust that for your time zone. And here's where the chart looks like where I am. So the ascendant might be a little bit different based on where you are, but the dynamics, the aspects in the chart besides the angles should be the same. Okay, so there's a few that really stand out to me as part of kind of bringing us into the second half of the lunar month. And so the first is the really obvious one. We've got the sun over here in Scorpio opposite the moon, which is conjoining almost to the arcminute Uranus. And so, the moon conjoins Uranus once a month. And that time, depending on how the power that the moon has in your chart, so what you have in Cancer, where Cancer is, if you have an angle there, whatever. The moon, when it hits Uranus, as it does once a month, we can kind of have a little bit of erratic behavior. Our emotions can become more volatile in the sense of they're more movable. They change more quickly. We can have sudden emotional surprises, sudden outbursts possibly that come up. And so this happens once a month, okay, whatever. Can have less of an effect on us. But this one, right, we've got a full moon. So we kind of have the moon in its peak power in Taurus, together with Uranus. And then we also have, the cultural reality of Halloween. And we've got the issues of Halloween happening during COVID, Halloween happening in a season where people are maybe not feeling so good because we're losing people. We basically all feel like we're losing our country, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. And so there's a lot of tension. We've got Mars, towards the end of the retrograde, but still kind of backing out of that square. We've been in Mars retrograde since the beginning of September. And different people have different stories about that, but it's putting a strain on things for sure. And so then we come to this crisis point where the moon literally hits this planet, Uranus, which is very good at making crises. So I kind of think of Uranus, and especially Uranus and Taurus, as the earthquake. And it may be a necessary earthquake, but earthquakes are not gentle, they're not like, okay, honey, now it's time for you to put on your big girl pants and be an individual and free yourself from this situation or try something new. No, it's like, the wall caves in behind you and then you can't go back. So it is potent and volatile energy to have at the crisis point of the lunar month. And so some of us, either some of us ourselves or some of the people around us, might have kind of erratic behavior around this full moon, which is very shocking. And then we will spend the next 2 weeks kind of dealing with that. Whether we do something erratic and then kind of get more than we bargained for is a really big thing that could happen here. It's kind of people having lots of tension. It's kind of a party holiday, although hopefully we're all maintaining safe social distancing. Maybe people indulge a little bit too much in substances and make some different decisions that then they have to deal with. We have Venus as the ruler of the moon. The moon is exalted, so she's quite powerful herself, but we also have her ruler, Venus, who is in the other sign of her rulership in Libra, which is better than Venus being in the sign of her fall in Virgo. However, if you look at the chart, she's in opposition to Chiron. So, depending on where you fall in that asteroid conversation, that's a challenging aspect. I think Chiron Venus can really pierce the heart and really kind of pierce our relationship. Now, I think you can look at Chiron as the wound, you can look at Chiron as the medicine, but medicine doesn't always taste very good. And in an opposition, we're kind of dealing with the tension of Venus in Libra, trying to harmonize everything and make sure we get along, and not wanting to rock the boat, wanting things to be okay, even if they have a little bit of tension can be creative. And so holding that, and then Chiron really being this medicine in Aries, or this wound in Aries, of when we act just for ourselves, how that wounds us as well as other people that we're in relationship with, or maybe it's not a good time for us to sacrifice ourselves for the harmony of our relationships, and the medicine that we really need is to advocate for our own needs, is to go it alone. But those two things are being pulled into stark relief. And when we have a lunation, the aspects that are in the lunation chart can kind of carry forward with us. So we might be feeling that tension over the next 2 weeks or so until we have the Scorpio new moon on the 14th. Now, kind of the final aspect that I think is really significant in this chart is Mercury square to Saturn. You can see Mercury has retrograded. It's stationed retrograde in Scorpio. It's moved back into Libra. So it's reviewing those parts of our charts. Those retrogrades, they can be transformative. They can be difficult. They can open our minds to new possibilities. And Mercury has gone back into Libra, wherever that is in your chart. But it is in a square with Saturn. And so part of when Mercury squares Saturn, it can kind of put a wet blanket on things. Saturn can kind of pull our view of things into the negative. And so that squares kind of that frustration. Mercury retrograde wants to find a way to make everything be okay. And Saturn is kind of a sticking point and doesn't want to compromise. And Mercury can feel the weight of Saturn. Now, Mercury has moved through the square before, when it was moving forward through Libra. But at that point, Venus wasn't in quite as good a position as she is now. So Venus in Libra is somewhat helpful in making that Mercury in Libra a little bit more potent, but honestly, when it is challenging Saturn, Saturn is quite potent. And so it can just be a lot to carry mentally, which I think can contribute to kind of reaching some kind of internal breaking point with the full moon, and breaking and having Uranus kind of throw a wrench in things. It can contribute to just kind of this feeling of mental exhaustion of what we have been carrying, and all the details and all the logistics, and even the weight of hope, and the energy that it takes to stay hopeful in these times. That can just feel like a lot. And so we've kind of got those three things. We've got the full moon conjunct Uranus. We've got Venus in opposition to Chiron. We have Mercury square Saturn. And they're kind of contained in this way, which they're not in direct kind of relationship to each other. So they're kind of pieces. So some of us might be feeling one aspect more than the other. Some of us might not, have the energy to really do a full moon. And also these lunations, full moons are going to feel different to you based on when your natal, what your natal moon phase is. I am a natal new moon, and full moons are they just feel so frenetic. They feel so busy. I just want to retreat into my little new moon cocoon, and let the real doers do their thing during the full moon. So that's another way to kind of receive this information is, okay, how does this really work with my moon phase as well? And this is the opposite moon phase of mine. So that's one way it can show up. Yeah, I think what's kind of significant, this is our last full moon before eclipse season. So we'll have one more lunation. We have a new moon on November 14th before eclipse season, but then the full moon, the full Gemini moon on November 30th will be an eclipse and bring us into eclipse season. So, so it's a pretty charged full moon, but the next one is kind of, even more so. So these are intense lunations that signal, pretty powerful pivots within the month energetically. So I think with this one, it's stay safe. Don't push yourself too hard with that Mercury square Saturn. Can get into trouble. Another thing, Mercury in Libra can just want to have some good fun, and Saturn in Capricorn, can be the police that don't really believe, that don't care about the fun that you want to have. Or with the current situation with the police, something more sinister. If the most trouble that you get into this Halloween is with the moon in Taurus, staying home and eating way too much candy, I'd say you kind of win this lunation, because it could be potentially dangerous with that Uranian unpredictability. But if you also want to try something that you haven't tried before, it's in Taurus, so maybe a new recipe. We are going to have a different kind of Halloween than we've had before, without trick-or-treating, without big parties. Maybe you're having costume parties over Zoom, and so you're accessing Uranus through technology rather than through action. That could be one way it shows up. So let me know how this goes for you. You can always come back to these videos after you've kind of been through the transits, felt the way it feels, and then kind of touch base again to kind of ground the experience. Sometimes things happen to us, and really I find astrology to be just as effective as a tool for looking back and kind of understanding and gaining context for what happened as being illuminating just as much, if not more so, than looking forward and trying to, prepare ourselves for what kinds of things might take shape and what we might feel and what is important to look out for in order to maintain a kind of emotional equilibrium through the choppy seas of 2020. Okay, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Feel free to like this video and subscribe if I'm an astrologer that you resonate with. I hope you have a wonderful evening and a safe and hopefully fun Halloween and full moon.